I opened my daughter's bedroom door just before midnight, expecting to see her curled up beneath her lavender blanket, the soft glow of her nightlight casting butterflies across the wall. Instead, I saw an empty bed. The sheets were smooth, cold, untouched. The window was locked from the inside, the curtains drawn exactly the way I had left them that morning. There were no signs of forced entry, no broken glass, no overturned furniture, just silence. A small sticky note sat neatly on her desk. I went to bed early. It wasn't her handwriting. My stomach dropped so fast it felt like I had stepped off a cliff. My name is Christina Lopez. I was 30 years old, a retail district manager in San Antonio, Texas, and the one thing I had always done right in my life was protect my daughter. In that moment, standing in the doorway of her empty bedroom, I knew something was terribly wrong. I called my mother first. She answered on the second ring. Calm, too calm, and told me Emily was spending the night at my sister Rebecca's house. Rebecca hated children. That was when I understood this wasn't a misunderstanding. My daughter hadn't wandered off. She had been taken. I forced myself to breathe. I had just returned from an emergency late meeting at one of my stores. I remembered locking the front door. I remembered setting the alarm. The security system had not been triggered. Emily's backpack still hung on the hook by the kitchen entry. Her shoes were lined up neatly by the mat. Nothing looked rushed. Nothing looked broken, which made it worse. I called my mother back and asked why no one had told me about this supposed sleepover. She sighed, as if I were the unreasonable one. Rebecca just wanted some time with her niece, she said. You're always so busy. Christina. Rebecca and I had barely spoken in months, ever since our father passed away 2 years earlier. The tension between us had grown heavier with each family dinner, each board meeting of the Lopez Family Cultural Trust. She believed I had manipulated Dad into naming me sole managing trustee. She believed I had stolen something that belonged to her. But she would never have taken Emily. I hung up before my mother could say another word. My hands were shaking so badly I almost dropped my phone as I opened the tracking app linked to Emily's smartwatch. The blue dot flickered, loaded slowly. It wasn't at Rebecca's house. It wasn't moving. It was stationary. The location name appeared beneath it. Oak Ridge Cemetery. Timestamp. 12:03 m. My throat closed. Oak Ridge Cemetery was on the far edge of town. It was where my father was buried. I didn't call Rebecca. I didn't call my mother again. I dialed 911 while running toward my car. My voice sounded distant to my own ears as I explained that my 8-year-old daughter was alone in a cemetery at midnight. Ma'am, the dispatcher asked carefully, are you saying your child is physically there right now? Yes, I whispered. And my sister is involved. Rain had begun to fall, light at first, tapping against my windshield as I sped through nearly empty streets. San Antonio felt different after midnight, wide, hollow, stripped of noise. Every red light felt like a personal attack. I kept glancing at the GPS, terrified the blue dot would start moving. It didn't. As I turned onto the gravel road leading into Oak Ridge, my headlights swept across rows of white headstones. The gate was open. My tires crunched loudly against the gravel as I drove deeper inside, toward the section where the Lopez family plot rested beneath an old oak tree. That was when I saw a car parked crookedly near the far fence. The driver's door was open. I didn't even turn off my engine. I jumped out, rain soaking through my blouse instantly. The night air smelled like wet earth and metal. I heard a faint sound before I saw her. A rustling. A small movement. I rounded the oak tree and the world narrowed to one terrible image. Emily was tied to the iron fence that bordered our family plot. Her wrists were bound with thick cord. 2 small suitcases stood beside her, one slightly unzipped. I caught a glimpse of folded clothes. A passport envelope. For a split second, my mind refused to process it. Then I heard my sister's voice behind me. You don't get to keep what was never yours. Rebecca stepped into the beam of my headlights. She looked composed, not frantic, not ashamed. What are you doing? My voice cracked. I moved toward Emily, placing myself between them. My daughter's eyes were wide, brimming with tears. But she was conscious. Rebecca folded her arms. You stole Dad's legacy. You stole control of the trust. And you think you get to pretend you're the only Lopez who matters. This is a child, I said, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the knots. She has nothing to do with your delusions. Rebecca's expression hardened. The community deserves to know who's really running that trust. The police are on their way. I told her. She smiled. Good. Let them come. Red and blue lights cut through the rain minutes later, reflecting off marble headstones. Officers rushed toward us, weapons drawn at first until they assessed the situation. Rebecca did not resist when they ordered her to step back. I tore the rope from Emily's wrists and wrapped my coat around her trembling shoulders. She clung to me, her small body shaking against mine, as an officer snapped handcuffs around Rebecca's wrists. She twisted just enough to look at me. Ask Mom what Dad changed before he died, she shouted. The words landed heavier than the metal clicking shut around her hands. I held my daughter tightly as the patrol car doors slammed and the sirens faded into the rain. Standing there in the cemetery where my father lay buried, I realized this night was never just about fear. It was about something buried long before midnight, and whatever my sister believed I had taken from her. It started with our father. The hospital lights were too bright for midnight. Emily lay in the narrow pediatric bed wrapped in heated blankets, her skin pale against the white sheets, her damp curls still clinging to her forehead. The monitors beside her beeped in steady rhythm, mechanical and indifferent, as if nothing extraordinary had happened at all. The doctor told me it was mild hypothermia, shock, possible acute stress response. She would need observation through the night. Maybe counseling afterward. Maybe. I sat beside her and held her hand while the rain from the cemetery dried stiff against my sleeves. My body was still buzzing with adrenaline, but my mind had slowed into something sharper. Colder. Rebecca's last words kept replaying in my head. Ask Mom what Dad changed before he died. Emily stirred slightly and tightened her grip on my fingers. Her eyelids fluttered open just enough for me to see fear still lingering there. Mom, she whispered. I'm here, I said immediately, brushing her hair back. She swallowed. Aunt Rebecca said, Grandpa didn't think you were really his. Is that true? The words punched the air out of my lungs. For a moment I couldn't speak. I had been prepared for accusations about money, about the trust, about favoritism. I had not been prepared for that. Why would she say that? I asked gently. She said you took something that wasn't yours, Emily murmured. She said Grandpa knew. My throat burned. I forced my voice steady. Your grandfather loved me. He loved you. That's what matters. But inside, something had shifted. Something ugly and unfamiliar. I had never heard that accusation before. The hospital room door opened quietly. My mother stepped inside. She looked composed. Not frantic. Not devastated. Just tired. She didn't rush to Emily's bedside. She didn't cry. She didn't demand to know what happened. She looked at me instead. You shouldn't have called the police, she said softly. The words stunned me. She tied your granddaughter to a cemetery fence. I replied, my voice low but sharp. She was trying to make a point. My mother insisted. You escalated it. I stared at her, searching for some crack in her expression, some flicker of regret. I found none. What did Dad change before he died? I asked. Silence filled the room. Emily's breathing slowed as she drifted back toward sleep. But my mother and I stood there locked in a quiet war. You know exactly what I'm talking about, I pressed. My mother's shoulders sagged. She pulled the visitor's chair closer but didn't sit. Years ago, she began carefully. Your father had doubts. My heart began to pound again. But this time it wasn't fear of physical danger. It was something deeper. He requested a DNA test, she continued, during a very difficult period in our marriage. The room felt smaller, and, I demanded. The lab results were inconclusive, she said quickly. There were errors. It was never finalized. He never pursued it again. I swallowed hard. Why am I just hearing this now? Because it didn't matter, she snapped. He chose to raise you. He never treated you differently. But Rebecca found the paperwork, I said slowly. My mother nodded. She went through your father's office after the funeral. She saw the old file. She convinced herself that he changed the trust because of guilt. Guilt, I repeated. She believes he gave you sole control of the Lopez family cultural trust because he felt uncertain about you. My mother said. She thinks he overcompensated. I felt something inside me fracture. So this, I gestured vaguely, meaning the cemetery, the rope, the rain, was about a 30-year-old suspicion. It's about legacy. My mother replied. Rebecca feels erased. I laughed. But there was no humor in it. She kidnapped my daughter to protect her pride. She wasn't going to hurt Emily. My mother insisted. She wanted to expose you. The word expose made my stomach turn. Expose what? She believes the community deserves transparency. That you misled them about the amendment to the trust. I thought of the suitcases beside Emily. The passport envelope. The documents. What exactly did she plan? I asked quietly. My mother hesitated again. And that hesitation told me everything. She intended to hold a press gathering tomorrow morning, she admitted. At the cemetery. Near your father's grave. My pulse spiked. She had copies of the old DNA file. My mother continued. Financial summaries from the trust. She prepared a statement accusing you of mismanagement. She used my child as a prop, I whispered. My mother flinched at that. She thought if people saw how serious she was, she began. Serious? I cut in. She bound my daughter to a fence in the rain. A knock interrupted us. A uniformed officer stepped inside briefly, informing me that Rebecca had posted bail within hours. She would be released pending charges. My body went cold. She's already out, I asked. Yes, ma'am, he confirmed. She retained counsel immediately. The door closed again. I looked at my mother slowly. You knew about this plan, I said. I didn't think she would go that far, she replied. But you knew. She didn't answer. The silence said enough. She's filed a civil petition, my mother added quietly, to suspend your authority as managing trustee. I stared at her. She's challenging the amendment your father signed. She claims it was manipulated. The pieces began locking together with terrifying clarity. The cemetery wasn't the endgame. It was the opening move. As my mother left the room, I checked my phone. A message from my attorney blinked across the screen. Rebecca Hale has filed an emergency motion questioning your control of the trust. Hearing likely within 48 hours. Call me immediately. I looked back at my daughter, small and still beneath hospital blankets. The cemetery had been about fear. This was about something far more calculated. Rebecca wasn't just trying to embarrass me. She was trying to dismantle everything my father entrusted to me. And if I didn't act fast, she might succeed. By the time we left the hospital the next afternoon, the rain had stopped. But the sky over San Antonio still felt heavy. Emily held my hand tighter than usual as we walked to the car. She didn't ask about Rebecca. She didn't ask about the cemetery. She just stayed close, as if distance itself had become dangerous. When we pulled into our driveway, I noticed the faint outline of Rebecca's footprint still pressed into the damp soil near the gate from the night before. The police had cleared the scene, but the memory lingered. Inside the house, everything looked exactly the way I had left it. Too normal? Emily went straight to the couch and curled up beneath her favorite throw blanket. I turned on every light in the house before locking the doors again. Then I called my attorney. Michael, tell me everything, I said the moment he answered. He didn't waste time. She filed an emergency civil motion challenging your authority as managing trustee of the Lopez Family Cultural Trust, he said. She claims your father was under emotional pressure when he amended the documents. She's requesting temporary suspension until the court reviews the matter. I closed my eyes. And the DNA issue? I asked. It's referenced, he replied carefully. She's implying there was undue influence based on family instability. Family instability. She's trying to create doubt, I said. Yes, Michael confirmed. If the judge believes there's a credible dispute about the amendment, the court could appoint a temporary co-administrator. That means shared control. Shared control meant access to the trust accounts, access to funds, access to the reputation my father spent decades building. I need every document, I said. Every signature. Every medical record from Dad's final months. I already started pulling them, he replied. We also need a forensic review of the trust's financial history. If she's going to accuse you, we need to be prepared. After I hung up, I walked into my father's old study. The shelves were still lined with leather-bound law books and framed photographs of scholarship recipients. The air carried the faint scent of his cologne, as if the room had never fully accepted his absence. I sat at his desk and opened the bottom drawer where I kept copies of the trust amendment. The date was clear. The notary seal was visible. 2 witnesses had signed. I remembered that afternoon vividly. My father had been tired but lucid. He had spoken clearly about restructuring leadership. He had said, "Legacy isn't about who feels entitled. It's about who shows up." I swallowed hard. My phone buzzed again. A notification from a local community blog. Questions raised about Lopez Family Trust leadership. The article was vague, but the implication was sharp. It mentioned an internal family dispute and hinted at possible financial opacity. She had already started. By evening, I had scheduled a meeting with Michael and a forensic accountant named Dana Ruiz. We met in Michael's downtown office, the skyline glowing faintly beyond the windows. Dana reviewed the trust's recent financial summaries. At first glance, she said, your records are clean, but we need to examine earlier years, especially during any shared oversight. I hesitated. There was a period, I admitted, about 3 years ago, when Rebecca helped coordinate event budgets. Dana nodded and made a note. If she's alleging misconduct, she said calmly, we need to ensure there's no vulnerability she can exploit. The next morning, I dropped Emily at school with specific instructions for the staff. No early dismissals. No family pickups without direct confirmation from me. The principal assured me they were aware of the situation. As I walked back to my car, I felt eyes on me. 2 parents near the entrance whispered softly. It could have been about anything, or it could have been about the blog post. When I arrived home, my phone rang again. This time it was my mother. You need to settle this quietly, she said without greeting. Dragging this through court will destroy the family name. The family name was destroyed the moment Rebecca tied my daughter to a fence, I replied. She believes you manipulated your father. My mother insisted. You need to show compassion. For what? I asked. For attempted public humiliation. There was a pause. She found more than the DNA file. My mother said carefully. My heartbeat quickened. What does that mean? She believes Dad changed the amendment in secret. She thinks there's something you haven't disclosed. I haven't hidden anything, I said. Then prove it, she replied quietly before hanging up. That evening, Dana called with preliminary findings. Christina, she began, her voice measured. I found several irregular transfers from 3 years ago. My stomach tightened. What kind of transfers? Small amounts redirected to an LLC registered under Rebecca Hale. I gripped the edge of the kitchen counter. Are you sure? The documentation is clear. The amounts weren't enormous individually, but cumulatively they're significant. A slow, cold understanding began to form. If this becomes part of court, Dana continued, it could shift the entire narrative. I stared at the trust logo engraved on the folder in front of me. Rebecca wasn't just attacking me. She was preemptively attacking before anyone discovered her own vulnerability. My phone buzzed again. A new notification. Rebecca Hale announces public statement regarding trust transparency. Scheduled for Sunday morning. Location: St. Matthew's Church. I looked at the date. 2 days away. She wasn't waiting for the court. She was planning to try me in the court of public opinion first. And this time, the battlefield wouldn't be a cemetery in the rain. It would be in front of the entire community. Sunday morning arrived heavy and gray, as if the sky itself was holding its breath. I stood in front of my closet longer than necessary, choosing a navy dress I had worn to board meetings and scholarship ceremonies. If Rebecca wanted a public confrontation, she would not get a spectacle from me. St. Matthew's Church had always been the heart of our community. My father had served on its advisory board for years. Scholarships were announced from its pulpit. Families gathered there after funerals and baptisms. It was sacred ground. Rebecca knew exactly what she was doing. By the time I arrived, the parking lot was already half full. I spotted a small folding table set up near the stone steps leading to the main entrance. A tripod stood beside it, a phone mounted and angled toward the walkway. Rebecca stood beside the table, composed in a cream blouse and tailored slacks. She looked less like a grieving sister and more like a candidate preparing for a press conference. My mother stood a few feet behind her. When Rebecca saw me, she didn't smile. "Thank you for coming," she said loudly enough for those nearby to hear. I didn't answer. I walked past her and into the sanctuary for service. Taking a seat in the third pew, whispers trailed behind me. A few people nodded in cautious greeting. Others avoided eye contact entirely. During the hymns, my thoughts stayed fixed on the folder in my purse. The notarized amendment, the trust records, the letter I had found in my father's study. I had not planned to use it yet, but I had brought it. After the final prayer, people began filtering outside. Rebecca moved quickly to the table and tapped her phone screen. "Friends," she called out, raising her voice just enough to command attention. "I've asked you to stay because the Lopez Family Cultural Trust belongs to this community, and you deserve transparency." The murmuring grew louder. She lifted a thin file from the table. 2 years ago, shortly before my father passed away, an amendment was made naming my sister sole managing trustee. An amendment signed during a time of medical vulnerability. My pulse thudded in my ears. "There were unresolved questions in our family," she continued, her tone calm but pointed. "Questions about legitimacy, about inheritance, about who truly had the right to carry our father's legacy." She held up a copy of the old DNA paperwork. A collective intake of breath rippled through the crowd. "She manipulated a grieving man," Rebecca said. "She isolated him, and she secured control." I stepped forward. "You're lying," I said quietly, but firmly. Rebecca's lips tightened. "Then prove it." I turned toward the gathering. "Yes, there was a DNA test years ago," I said. "It was inconclusive. It was never finalized, and my father never treated me as anything less than his daughter." "That's not the point," Rebecca shot back. The amendment was suspicious. I reached into my purse and removed the notarized documents. "This was signed in the presence of 2 witnesses and a licensed notary," I said. "Medical records confirm he was mentally competent." Rebecca laughed softly. "You expect us to believe that without seeing everything." "You will," I replied. Michael stepped beside me, holding a separate folder. "We've retained an independent forensic accountant," he announced. "Full financial transparency will be provided within 24 hours. Rebecca's expression flickered for the first time. "Transparency," she echoed. "You want transparency? Let's talk about favoritism. Let's talk about how Dad changed the structure in secret." I unfolded the letter. "I found this in his study," I said, my hand steady despite the tremor inside my chest. It was addressed to me. Rebecca's jaw tightened. I began reading aloud. "If this letter is ever needed, it means someone is trying to rewrite my intentions. I amended the trust not out of guilt or confusion, but because leadership requires accountability. Rebecca has shown a pattern of financial irresponsibility that cannot be ignored." A hush fell over the church steps. Rebecca's face drained of color. "That's fabricated," she snapped. "It's notarized," Michael replied calmly. "We have the original." A man from the trust board stepped forward hesitantly. "I was present that afternoon," he said. "Your father was clear about his decision." Rebecca's composure cracked. "He was pressured." she insisted. She isolated him. I looked at her. You're accusing me of manipulation, I said. But 3 years ago, during your oversight of event budgets, funds were redirected to an LLC registered under your name. The crowd stirred. Rebecca's eyes widened. That's absurd, she said quickly. Those transfers are documented, Michael added, and currently under forensic review. Silence stretched between us. You're trying to smear me, Rebecca hissed. No, I replied. You tried to smear me. I turned back to the gathering. My daughter was tied to a cemetery fence at midnight because my sister wanted a stage, I said. If you want transparency, you will have it. But you will not get it through intimidation. A murmur of shock rippled through the crowd. Some had not known that detail. Rebecca's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the table. This isn't over, she whispered. No, I agreed softly. It isn't. As people began dispersing, Michael leaned close to me. If the financial discrepancies hold, he said quietly, this won't just be a civil dispute anymore. I watched Rebecca gather her papers with rigid movements. She had come to publicly dismantle my credibility. Instead, she had exposed her own vulnerability. And the next time we faced each other, it wouldn't be on church steps. It would be in a courtroom. The morning after the church confrontation, my phone would not stop ringing. Voicemails from board members, messages from donors, 2 requests for interviews from local reporters. Rebecca had succeeded in one thing. She had made this impossible to ignore. But she had miscalculated something else. By 10 Michael and I were seated across from Dana Ruiz in a conference room overlooking downtown San Antonio. A stack of printed financial statements lay spread across the table between us. Dana adjusted her glasses and slid one sheet toward me. These transfers, she said, tapping the highlighted lines, were initiated during the 6-month period when Rebecca had limited budget oversight for community outreach events. I stared at the column of numbers. Individually, they were modest, 5,000 here, 8,000 there. Nothing that would have raised immediate suspicion in a trust that handled hundreds of thousands annually. But together, they formed a pattern. And they went to her company, I asked. To an LLC registered under her name. Donna confirmed. Hale Community Consulting. No active contracts on record. Michael leaned back in his chair. If this is presented in court, he said, it shifts the narrative entirely. My pulse slowed into something steady and deliberate. She accused me of manipulation, I murmured, while she was moving funds, which suggests, Dana added carefully, she may have anticipated scrutiny. Anticipated scrutiny. A preemptive strike. My phone buzzed again. Rebecca Hale has amended her civil petition. I opened the email Michael forwarded seconds later. The new filing accused me not only of undue influence, but of breach of fiduciary duty. She claimed I had concealed financial data from the board. She's escalating, I said. She's desperate, Michael corrected. I left the office with a folder of certified copies and a decision forming in my mind. I would not wait for her next move. That afternoon, I met with the district attorney's office. I laid the evidence on the table, bank statements, incorporation documents, digital timestamps. The assistant DA listened without interruption. If these transfers were unauthorized, he said slowly, we're looking at potential fraud and falsification of records. And if it ties to the civil dispute, I asked, it becomes motive, he replied. When I stepped outside into the sunlight, I felt something I hadn't felt since the cemetery. Control. But control did not mean safety. The next morning, the principal of Emily's school called me. Mrs. Lopez, she began gently. Your sister came to the front office yesterday. My grip tightened around the phone. She requested to see Emily. She claimed there was a family emergency. My heart slammed against my ribs. You didn't let her, I said. Of course not. But I felt you should know. After I hung up, I drove straight to the school and met with the administrative staff. We updated Emily's emergency contact list. Only my name, No exceptions. When I returned to my car, I noticed a vehicle idling at the far end of the parking lot. Rebecca's car. She didn't step out. She didn't wave. She just watched. That evening, Michael called with confirmation. "The DA's office is opening a formal review," he said. "If they proceed, it won't just be civil." "Good," I replied. There was a pause on the line. "Christina," he said carefully, "once this becomes criminal, it won't be reversible. Your mother will be dragged into it if she knew." I closed my eyes briefly. She chose her side. I said. Later that night, I checked the exterior cameras before locking up. The driveway was empty. At 11:43 p.m., my phone buzzed with a motion alert. Front perimeter movement detected. My heart began to pound as I pulled up the live feed. Rebecca stood at the edge of the driveway, just beyond the porch light's glow. She wasn't trying to enter. She wasn't speaking. She just stood there, arms folded, staring at the house. I watched her for several long seconds. Then she lifted her phone and took a photograph of my home. I dialed the police immediately. By the time officers arrived, she was gone. The next morning, Michael informed me that the judge had scheduled a preliminary review of both the civil petition and the protective order request. "Be prepared," he said. "She'll try to frame this as emotional distress." I almost laughed. Emotional distress. That afternoon, I received a message from my mother. "You are tearing this family apart." I stared at the words. No. I thought. The family was torn apart the moment secrets became weapons. As evening fell, I sat alone in my father's study, reviewing the documents one more time. Every transfer, every signature, every timestamp. Rebecca believed she could corner me with insinuations and staged humiliation. She believed she could intimidate me through my child. She believed I would retreat to protect the illusion of family unity. She was wrong, because this was no longer about sibling rivalry. It was about fraud. It was about coercion. It was about a calculated attempt to dismantle a legacy built on service to the community. And as I shut off the lights and headed upstairs to check on Emily one last time, I understood something clearly. Rebecca had forced this fight into the open. Now the law would decide who had truly betrayed the Lopez name. The courtroom felt colder than the hospital had. I stood beside Michael at the defense table reserved for petitioners, watching Rebecca sit across from us with her attorney. She wore a charcoal suit, her posture upright, her expression carefully neutral. My mother sat directly behind her, rosary wrapped tightly around her fingers. The hearing was technically procedural, a review of Rebecca's civil motion and the request for an extended protective order, but the room carried the weight of something much larger. The judge entered, and the murmur dissolved instantly. Rebecca's attorney rose first. "Your Honor," he began, smooth and composed, "my client has acted out of concern for the integrity of the Lopez Family Cultural Trust. She believes the amendment granting sole authority to Ms. Lopez was executed under emotional strain and unresolved family instability. Family instability," he continued. "Additionally, there remain unresolved questions about biological legitimacy, which may have influenced decision-making." I felt the sting of the words but kept my face still. Michael stood calmly when it was our turn. "The amendment in question was signed in the presence of a licensed notary and 2 witnesses," he said. "Medical records confirm Mr. Lopez was legally competent at the time." He handed copies to the clerk. Rebecca's attorney shifted tactics. "We also question whether financial transparency has been adequately maintained," he added. That was the opening. Michael nodded to Dana, seated behind us. Dana stepped forward and took the stand. She spoke clearly and precisely, explaining the forensic audit conducted over the past week. She described the pattern of transfers during Rebecca's oversight period. She identified the LLC registered under Rebecca's name. Rebecca's jaw tightened. "These transfers," Dana concluded, "lack documented authorization from the board." Rebecca's attorney rose quickly. "Were these funds substantial?" he pressed. "Individually modest," Dana replied. Collectively significant. A murmur rippled through the room. Then the assistant district attorney stood. Your Honor, he said. Based on evidence submitted this week, the office has initiated a formal review for potential criminal fraud and falsification of records. Rebecca's composure flickered for the first time. The judge leaned forward slightly. Ms. Halle, he said, addressing Rebecca directly. Are you aware of these allegations? Rebecca stood slowly. I acted within my authority, she said firmly. Any transfers were reimbursements. For which you have contracts, the judge asked. Rebecca hesitated. They were verbal agreements, she replied. Michael didn't look at me. But I felt the shift in momentum. The assistant DA presented enlarged copies of signature comparisons. A handwriting expert had reviewed the authorization form linked to one of the larger transfers. The signature on this document, the expert testified, is highly inconsistent with known verified samples of Mr. Lopez's handwriting. Rebecca's attorney objected, but the judge allowed the testimony. Rebecca took the stand for cross-examination. You testified earlier that the amendment was invalid, Michael said calmly. Yet you also stated your father promised you leadership before changing his mind. Rebecca's lips pressed into a thin line. He changed it under pressure, she insisted. So you acknowledge he did change it? Michael asked. Silence hung for a beat too long. Yes, she said finally. A quiet ripple moved through the courtroom. The judge made a note. The assistant DA rose again. Your Honor, given the emerging evidence and the ongoing criminal review, we request the court maintain Ms. Lopez's authority over the trust until final resolution. Rebecca's attorney argued back, claiming emotional distress, claiming sibling rivalry, claiming the cemetery incident had been mischaracterized. That word, mischaracterized, echoed in my head. She restrained a minor at a cemetery. Michael stated plainly. There is body camera footage confirming this. The judge turned to me briefly. Miss Lopez, he said. Have there been further attempts at contact? Yes. Your Honor? I replied steadily. She approached my daughter's school. She was recorded outside my home late at night. The judge's expression hardened. The ruling came swiftly. The court denies the motion to suspend Ms. Lopez's authority pending full review, he said. A temporary protective order is extended. The matter of alleged financial misconduct will proceed to criminal evaluation. Rebecca's shoulders stiffened. This is not justice, she said suddenly, her voice rising. The judge struck his gavel lightly. Miss Halle, you will maintain composure. As proceedings adjourned, Rebecca turned toward me. You think this is over? She whispered as deputies moved closer. You haven't heard everything Dad left behind. Her words unsettled me more than I expected. What else could there be? Outside the courthouse, the Texas heat felt almost jarring after the sterile air inside. Michael walked beside me. She contradicted herself, he said quietly. That helps us. But she sounded certain, I replied, about something else. He paused. If there is more, he said, we'll uncover it. I watched Rebecca being escorted to a waiting car, her mother following close behind. This had started with suspicion. It had escalated into public humiliation. Now it stood on the edge of criminal prosecution. But as I slid into my own car and gripped the steering wheel, one thought lingered stubbornly in my mind. Rebecca believed there was still a truth powerful enough to undo me, and I needed to find out what it was before she did. The morning of the trial felt unnaturally quiet. Emily had left early for school with a security escort arranged through the temporary protective order. I stood in the kitchen alone for a moment, staring at the coffee mug in my hand, steadying myself before stepping into what would likely be the final confrontation. The Bexar County Courthouse loomed against a pale blue Texas sky. Community members had already gathered outside, some out of curiosity, others because the Lopez Family Cultural Trust had supported their children's scholarships. Rebecca was seated at the defense table when I entered. She looked thinner than she had weeks earlier, her hair pulled back tightly, her expression drawn but composed. Her attorney leaned close, whispering instructions. My mother sat behind her, rosary beads sliding silently through her fingers. The prosecutor rose as soon as proceedings began. Your Honor, he said, the state formally brings charges of unlawful restraint of a minor, attempted coercion, criminal fraud, falsification of financial documents, and defamation with malicious intent. The words felt heavy. Final. Rebecca's attorney stood immediately. My client's actions were rooted in emotional distress and long-standing family trauma, he argued. She did not intend harm. She sought transparency. Transparency. The prosecutor called the first witness, the responding officer from the cemetery night. He described arriving at Oak Ridge Cemetery just after midnight. He described finding my daughter restrained to an iron fence. He described the luggage placed beside her. Did the defendant appear distressed? The prosecutor asked. No. Sir, the officer replied. She appeared calm. The body camera footage was played for the court. I forced myself to watch. Rebecca's voice carried clearly in the recording. She needed to understand what it feels like to lose control, she had said. A ripple of shock moved through the courtroom. Next came the forensic accountant. Donna walked through the financial transfers, the creation of Hale Community Consulting, the absence of documented contracts. She presented the timeline showing that the most significant transfer occurred just weeks before my father amended the trust. The handwriting expert followed, confirming the signature on one authorization form did not match verified samples from my father. Rebecca took the stand in her own defense. Her attorney guided her gently at first. You felt excluded? He asked. Yes, she said quietly. I was pushed aside. Did you believe the trust amendment was unjust? Yes. And the cemetery incident? I wanted her to listen, Rebecca said. I wanted the community to ask questions. The prosecutor stepped forward for cross-examination. You bound an 8-year-old child to a fence, he said evenly. You prepared luggage. You drafted a press release. You arranged a live stream. Does that sound like a conversation? Rebecca's composure faltered. I was desperate, she insisted. Desperate enough to forge a signature. He pressed. I did not forge. He interrupted her with a printed exhibit showing digital metadata from the altered document. The file containing the disputed authorization was edited on your laptop at 11:47 p.m. May. The night before the church confrontation. Silence blanketed the room. Rebecca's eyes darted briefly toward my mother. I believed I was correcting something wrong, she whispered. The prosecutor's voice sharpened. You believed you were entitled. She said nothing. When it was my turn to testify, I stood and walked to the witness stand with steady steps. I described the moment I found Emily's empty bed, the sticky note, the GPS location, the sight of my daughter trembling in the rain. I did not raise my voice. I did not cry. I spoke about the trust, about its purpose, about the students it supported, about my father's insistence that leadership required accountability. I did not seek revenge, I said finally. I sought protection. The jury listened in silence. Closing arguments were brief. Rebecca's attorney appealed to sympathy, to childhood rivalry, to unresolved doubt. The prosecutor appealed to evidence. The jury deliberated less than 3 hours. When they returned, the courtroom felt smaller somehow. On the charge of unlawful restraint of a minor, guilty. Rebecca's shoulders slumped slightly. On the charge of criminal fraud, guilty. My mother covered her mouth with her hand. On the charge of falsification of records, guilty. Each word landed with the weight of inevitability. The judge removed his glasses and looked directly at Rebecca. Your actions were deliberate, he said. You weaponized a child and attempted to undermine a charitable institution for personal gain. This court finds no mitigating justification. He announced the sentence. 14 years in state prison. Permanent no-contact order regarding my daughter. Restitution to the trust. Rebecca let out a strangled sound. Part disbelief. Part anger. My mother stood abruptly, then collapsed back into her seat, tears spilling freely for the first time. I did not move. Outside the courthouse, The sunlight felt blinding. Michael handed me a thick envelope. "This was recovered during evidence review," he said. "From your father's private files? It was labeled for you." I stared at my father's familiar handwriting on the front. "For Christina, if they ever try to rewrite me." As deputies escorted Rebecca into the transport vehicle, she turned once more in my direction. There was no triumph in me, only a quiet, unshakable certainty. This fight had never been about proving I deserved something. It had been about proving I would protect what mattered. And whatever was inside that envelope would be the final piece of a story that had started long before the cemetery. I didn't open the envelope right away. It sat on my father's old desk for 3 days, untouched, as if breaking the seal would reopen wounds that had only just begun to close. The house felt quieter after the trial. Not peaceful yet, just quieter. On the 4th evening, after Emily had gone to bed without asking for the hallway light to stay on, I carried the envelope into the study and locked the door behind me. My father's handwriting stretched across the front in steady blue ink. "For Christina, if they ever try to rewrite me." My fingers trembled as I slid a letter opener beneath the flap. Inside were 2 documents, a handwritten letter and a notarized affidavit. I unfolded the letter first. "If you are reading this," it began, "then someone has tried to weaponize doubt against you. I feared this might happen." I swallowed hard and continued. "Years ago, during a difficult season in our marriage, I allowed suspicion to cloud my judgment. I requested a DNA test. The first result was inconclusive. I regret that moment more than any other in my life." My vision blurred slightly. A second test was completed quietly months later. It confirmed what I already knew in my heart. You are my daughter. But more importantly, you are the one who stood beside me when leadership required sacrifice. I pressed my hand to my mouth. He did a second test. I whispered to the empty room. I never shared the confirmation. The letter continued. Because biology was never the foundation of our family. Choice was, I amended the trust because stewardship requires integrity. Rebecca lacked restraint. You possessed it. Tears slid down my face, silent and steady. The affidavit detailed Rebecca's earlier financial discrepancies in far greater depth than I had known. My father had discovered irregularities years before his death. He had confronted her privately. He had chosen not to prosecute. He had chosen mercy. And in doing so, he had also chosen me. I sat back in the leather chair, the weight of it settling into my bones. Rebecca had believed I was favored because of guilt, but my father had chosen me because of accountability. The next morning, I met with the board of the Lopez Family Cultural Trust. I did not mention the second DNA confirmation. That truth belonged to my father and me. It did not need to become another headline. Instead, I announced reforms. Independent audits would be conducted annually. Oversight committees expanded. Transparency increased. We renamed one of the scholarship divisions, the Legacy of Choice Fund. When I returned home that afternoon, Emily was in the backyard drawing chalk hearts on the patio. "Mom," she called when she saw me, "can we go see Grandpa this weekend?" The question tightened my throat. "Yes," I said softly. "We can, at Oak Ridge Cemetery." Sunlight filtered gently through the oak branches. There was no rain this time. No flashing lights. No fear. Emily placed a small bouquet beside the headstone. "Did Grandpa really choose you?" she asked. I knelt beside her. "He chose responsibility," I said. "And I choose you. Every day." She smiled. And in that smile, I saw something returning. Security. Months passed. Emily began sleeping through the night again. The haunted look in her eyes faded slowly, replaced by curiosity and laughter. She joined a local art club. She stopped glancing over her shoulder when we walked into crowded spaces. My mother attempted contact once through a cousin. I did not respond. Grief lingered, not just for the sister I lost, but for the illusion of family unity I had clung to for years. But grief no longer controlled me. The scholarship ceremony that fall was held at St. Matthew's Church. I stood at the podium beneath stained glass windows that had witnessed both accusation and redemption. When I announced the new class of recipients, applause filled the sanctuary. This time, there were no whispers, no cameras angled for scandal, just students and families and the quiet continuation of something my father had built. That night, after Emily was asleep, I sat alone on the back porch and let the Texas air settle around me. The cemetery night no longer replayed in sharp fragments. It had softened into memory. Retribution had come, not because I sought to destroy my sister, but because I refused to let silence protect wrongdoing. Blood had once felt like obligation. Now it felt like history. Family, I realized, was defined by who stood between you and the storm, not who created it. If you had been in my place, would you have stayed quiet to protect a name? Or would you have risked everything to protect your child? I never imagined I would have to choose between my sister and my daughter. But when the moment came, the answer was simple. Some legacies are inherited, others are defended. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever faced betrayal within your own family, or fought to protect the people you love, I hope you'll share your thoughts. Your experiences matter more than you think. Stay with this community. Subscribe if you want more stories about resilience, justice, and the quiet strength it takes to stand your ground. Because sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought against strangers. They're fought across the dinner table. And sometimes, choosing your child over tradition is the bravest legacy you can leave behind. This story is fictionalized for dramatic effect.